Hi, this is Daniela Wolf with Bestie Life, the podcast, and this is your community to support you through the little and not so little events that make up your day-to-day life. From the I've got this moments to the I just can't moments. We are here to empower all women to find and develop the skills they need to find peace, balance, and the bliss in their busy. Through solo episodes as well as interviews with amazing women who share their journey and their story and how it works for you. I hope you find the inspirations to make you laugh, think, as well as maybe rethink what you thought you knew, and connect as we realize that we are all living similar ups and downs and don't have to do it alone. So excited for you to hear this episode, and thanks so much for joining me today. Hi, this is Daniela with Bestie Life, the podcast, and today I'm so excited for you to meet Kristen Donnelly. She is also another MSW as well as a PhD. She's an award-winning 4-time TEDx speaker, international empathy educator, author, and researcher with over 2 decades of experience in helping people understand the beauty in difference and the power of inclusivity. She is one of the good doctors of Abbey Research. She's the COO of their parent company and co-founder of the Community Research Institute, and an unapologetic nerd for stories of change. Her book, which we're going to talk about, is The Culture of Burnout, Why Your Exhaustion is Not Your Fault. And thank you so much, Kristen. I'm so excited to dive in.
Oh my gracious. Thank you for the honor of asking me to be here.
So I know that was kind of a summary of everything that you've done. Can you give more information as far as like your journey, how you got here, and how you help people?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So the summary is always a good place to start because the journey is long, right? It's always is. I have been very blessed to be part of a family that has a mission statement to impact lives and create holistic wealth. And for most of my life, since I was 7 years old, so we're hitting like 34 years, we've done that through owning a company or that grew to a network of companies. So I've been essentially in a family business since I was 7, but a family business with a purpose statement.
Right.
So my whole life has been crafted towards how do we as a family and me as an individual make someone else's life better every day? What does that look like? How do we move through that? And so that's been the question I've been answering throughout all my graduate work and everything. I was a researcher for a while in graduate work. And as you said, social worker, and my social work focus was international nonprofits.
Okay.
And how do we empower, the saying is the people closest to the problem are closest to the solution. Mm-hmm. So how do we empower folks to find their own solutions? Another master's degree in cross-cultural religious anthropology. That question is how do we understand better what people believe and how that affects how they live? And then my doctorate is in sociology, and kind of all of these trainings that I've had to learn how people work and how they work together and what they believe about themselves and how that affects how they treat other people. And even more importantly, sometimes how it affects how they treat themselves and what that kind of looks like. So that has all happened within the context of this family business, to be honest. And so when I finished my doctorate in 2015, which I was pursuing in Northern Ireland, I moved back to Philadelphia, where I've been based. My family's been based since I was 7, and what I call home. So we moved back to Philly, and I created a division of our family company that would essentially take all of that academic knowledge that I've had and I've been gathering, and all the training I've had at some of the best universities in the world as to how to ask questions and analyze situations. Combine that with our family's, lived experience of running a business, my dad's decades of business experience, and combine it in a way to figure out how to help everyone treat each other better, but specifically how to help companies treat their employees better.
Yeah.
So that's what the journey has been. And through that, I then hired my best friend, which I totally recommend if you have the communication skills that we have. And I do not recommend if you do not like hard conversations. But I hired my best friend, Erin, right after I started the division. And since then, that's what we do. So we've written a book, like you said. We started a research institute at a university so that we could really look at data about generations. And how does being in a different generational cohort affect how you see the world and move through the world and all of that. That's the journey is this every day, honestly, thinking and wondering and questioning, how does the incredible privilege that I've been born into, live with every day? How do I leverage that for the promotion and privilege of others?
I love all of that. The fact that your family had a mission statement. I think so many times we separate work and home and not realizing they're so synonymous, they're so similar, and they impact each other, that why wouldn't we have a family mission statement? Why wouldn't we have family meetings, family conversations, a whole kind of mindset that everyone buys into, and just a way of running things to have that same kind of kindness and courtesy, like you said, and care for each other, even at work, then the same way we do for a family, because, we call our family at work our family, that's our work family. Those are the people I spend 8 hours a day with and those kind of things. So why not bridge how we look at those relationships and talk to each other and all of, create those connections?
Yeah. And everybody has things they believe that they don't always say out loud, right? So, I mean, my parents were just really, and still are, I mean, they're both still with us. And my brother and I have taken over the network of companies now from our dad, but he still shows up to work every day because I think he doesn't know what else to do with himself. So he still has his office, because my brother and I don't want his office. We like our offices. There's a lot of clarity that comes with sitting down and saying, okay, as a group of people, what do we want to be about? And, ours is 2 lines, and that's it. Impact lives, create wealth. That's it. And that it's complicated and wild. And when my brother and I were in the process of, we knew we were taking over for our dad about 3 years before it actually legally happened. Like, we started that process intentionally, and we went away on a 2-day retreat with a member of our advisory board. And he said, throw out the mission statement, pretend you don't have it, create a completely new one for yourself. And in the 2 days, we tried a bunch of other things, and we kept saying to each other, well, what do we want to be about? What do we want our legacy to be? What do we want this company to be known for? And we finally just looked at each other at in the middle of day 2, and we said, we don't want a different mission statement. Like, this is the one that makes sense. And so it's been really interesting to know. And we wrote it as a family when I was in my 20s, but I look back and like, that's what we've always been about. That's what it has been. That's what has been. And because of that driving purpose and focus that my parents had, this was the lens through which I was raised. And so I think, I'm a huge believer that we can't separate work and family. That's a fallacy that only worked for middle-class white men with support systems at home where they could pretend that they separated. That was never actually possible. We just pretended that it was. And so, some of the folks listening, it might sound really scary or like corporate to have a mission statement for your family. And it might sound a little overwhelming to have things like family meetings. We did, because then they became a tax write-off because we were the board.
There you go.
Worked really well. But instead, think of it as, what do you want your family to be known for? When your kids' friends describe you, how do they describe you? That's what the mission statement is for us. We want people to describe us as generous, servants, loving, all of those things. And so that's what we put into the plumb line that we measure our lives by.
Right. And the way you talk about too, it's about a culture of how you treat people. And the way you said initially, like, it affects how we treat ourselves, because we forget sometimes we're people, and we are so much kinder and nicer to everybody else than we are to ourselves, whether it's what we say in our head, what we say out loud, the allowances, the grace that we give. And so I think by internalizing that, we learn how to treat ourselves just like we do everybody else, if not better.
Yeah. Yeah. It's fascinating. And this in social work world, it's fascinating, the people who treat themselves so much better than they treat other people, and the people that treat themselves so much worse than they treat other people. There's almost nobody that treats the other people and ourselves as the same.
Right.
It's always the other two things. Yeah, and it's hard. It's really hard.
Right. And you talked about too, looking at the generational piece a little bit too, and probably even culturally, generationally, I don't know if I said that word right, but, like, I'm a first generation American. My family grew up in Sicily. My parents had very kind of stereotypical roles, so to speak. Yeah. My mom was that martyr. She was the one who sat down last, who took care of herself last, all those kind of things, and definitely undoing some of those generational cultural types of ways of doing things, I'm sure has been a part of what you've seen in your research and studied as part of the process and all of that.
Oh gosh, yeah. I mean, so first of all, there are people out there that say understanding generations isn't important. It's like a cop out. And that bothers me because when we talk about generations, it's people who are in the same age bracket who came of age at the same chunk of time in life.
Mm-hmm.
And so they are impacted by the technology that was invented, the big things that were happening, stuff like that. In the same way as like, if you said generations don't matter, you're saying like, to me, in terms of like how we understand people, you're almost saying like gender doesn't matter. Like it's another way in which people interact with the world. And so to say it doesn't matter is disingenuous. It is a layer. So when we look at those layers in a way, for sure, I mean, like you just talked about like the first generation thing, like that, first generation immigrant is like this whole other category that we then put a lens of generation entirely over, but I'll say there's a couple truisms, like, people who are in the baby boomer generation much more tend to be, their idea of hard work involves, for instance, like being in an office for a certain amount of time. Their idea of loyalty is the same relationship with that company for a long time. Their idea of culture is that it needs to stay the way it was when they were growing up.
Right.
Kind of how it, as it were. Gen X folks are much more cool. They're much more comfortable to fly under the radar, even in the office. They don't tend to want to make a lot of noise. They tend to just want to get stuff done and then go home and be done. And thank you very much. And then we evolve from those things into millennials, millennials are statistically the biggest group of people in the United States, statistically, like birth-wise and everything else right now. And specifically in the workforce, millennials are massive. And so the millennial cultural values are experiences over things, and an understanding of flexibility and purpose and calling rather than loyalty to a company. And those are some really clear shifts. And then Gen Z is a whole other thing, because God love them. They went through puberty on Instagram, and like that has just fried their brains, and God love them. We have done so much wrong to them. And now we're blaming them for the things that we've done wrong to them. But it's layers that we need to be aware of, but it's never determinants, if that makes sense. But it's just things that shape how we move through the world.
Absolutely. And hearing you describe some of them, I was laughing a little bit as a Gen Xer. I can definitely see those traits and those things the way they were talked about. We weren't supposed to brag about ourselves. We weren't supposed to do a lot of things, especially as a woman as well.
Oh, for sure.
There were a lot of rules, which we're breaking all over the place now, and I love it.
Yeah. And I'm an elder millennial. I'm in, the Oregon Trail generation, like the last couple of years, first couple of years of millennial, the last couple of years of Gen X, like that kind of pocket. And I remember being told my whole childhood that I could be anything I wanted to be, anything. And for most of my life, like that was really thought of as positive, right? Like, oh my gosh, we gave these kids, we told them anything. And then all of us get to our 20s. A lot of us have like crippling anxiety disorders. And we started to realize that the problem with telling a kid that they can be anything is that you can't.
Right.
You actually can't. And then the side of that is that we then when we were starting to try to get jobs and everything else, the world physically changed. Like the statement I keep hearing that I really love is that millennials were raised into a society that no longer existed.
Wow.
And they still haven't been able to square that circle. And that's large. I understand that a lot. I feel that from a lot of my peers, kind of towards the end of Gen X. And for us is when a lot of the adult markers started changing because of crippling debt. And, I was in college when they started really, really targeting college students for credit cards.
Oh, yeah.
And so you have student loan debt, and I have a couple friends that like defaulted on credit cards in their early 20s.
Wow.
So like, try getting a house. So, it's all of that. So it doesn't matter, but it does. And it's another piece to see how you see yourself. And the more we talk about it, I think it's helpful, because the more I say like, well, this is how I see the world, or this is my experience, and someone else can say, I don't see it that way at all. Then we get to dig a little deeper into, why do I think that? Why does that matter to me? Why is that a thing? Because I thought this thing I said out loud is how everyone feels. Right. And this person just came back to me and said, I don't see the world that way. And now we can kind of figure out on a deeper level what is actually true for each of us.
So when you work with companies, is that the kind of like conversations and trainings that you do with them?
Sometimes. A lot of it right now is a whole lot about helping people not demonize each other. and understanding that every age cohort of people brings positive and negatives into each workforce. And talking a lot to, there's a lot of the narrative out there, and the research will kind of talk about how there's this group in the office, there's boomers and Xers and millennials, and they are all in one pocket, and they kind of all agree that Gen Z is lazy and awful and they don't want to work with them anymore.
Right.
What I see more often is that Gen Z, millennials, and younger X's are all looking at us saying, how do I convince my boomer boss that the way he used to run things doesn't work anymore?
Yeah.
And both of those are massive conflict, but it requires a lot more creativity, ingenuity, patience, grace. Again, I'll say it, curiosity, to meld those bridges. So we spend a lot of time, Erin and I, first of all, just doing training and helping people understand what the world was like when each of these generations were teenagers, when their brains were developing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And what is really happening, and talking about helping also like a lot of older folks now who may or may not know, college students, for instance, may or may not have ever had a kid who grew up in the No Child Left Behind education system, who has never had a child go through an active shooter drill.
Right.
Kind of like, well, what could that do? Why does this matter? Why is this cultural thing that matters? And then also looking at Gen Z kids and saying, this is how everyone else sees the world. Do you know how you grew up with a phone in your pocket? I need you to understand, the first time I got a cell phone, I was a freshman in college. Mm-hmm. And the first time I got a smartphone was when smartphones were invented, and I was in my 20s. Right. And helping them conceptualize of a world different than the one they're living in. And then we can do a lot more practical stuff of like, well, what is your problem? Let's work through this particular issue. Let's talk about how we communicate with each other, and let's set up some systems where, again, I mean, the best leadership is based on curiosity. So we just help people set up systems that encourage and cultivate curiosity.
I love all of that, because I definitely, even just, the current job I've been in, when I first started 25 years ago, there were no cell phones. There were, the internet wasn't even really a thing. You had like maybe a desktop at work, but at home it was possibly not. And so to see how that's changed, how people are communicating, how people are coping, their resilience, all sorts of things, definitely the progression of it over just even a short period of time is amazing. And it definitely ties into what I feel like, from your book standpoint, because I want to get to that as well. The burnout that we see, I think definitely ties into some of these generational things and how people cope. But I want to hear a little bit more about like the book and share about that.
It's fascinating when we thought about, there is a whole section on generations in the book, and what does burnout and rest and work-life balance and things mean to different generations. We thought about that a lot. The crux of our book, and the reason we feel really comfortable exploring things like generations, is that our contention is that America as a culture actually runs on burnout. Mm-hmm. And that the American dream is not possible without burnout, either yours or someone else's, and most likely both. And that the way that the United States has particularly created its form of capitalism is that we have also, and that comes back to the, some of the first white folks that came over in the 1600s, we've attached the idea that there is a moral value to hard work. Yes. And this is not something that other cultures did or do. And some of them it's we hear from readers that like it's leaking, or like they kind of do it too. But when we look at the American structural state of like why we don't have any real like social safety nets, a huge part of that argument is that in order to be a good person, you have to be a hard worker. And then therefore, if you're not a good person, you don't deserve help. And so kind of this whole way that we've crafted it. And so if you consider that your personhood is not the important thing, your morality is. So it's much more important that you are a hard worker and a good person. And a good person is only a hard worker. So like that doesn't mean like you're kind. It doesn't mean that you are well rested. It doesn't mean like a whole lot of other things that it should mean. It just means that you're a hard worker. And the system, the theological system that this comes from is Puritan. It was from the Puritans that we got back in the 1600s. they had three tenets that were really important. And one is that you were only a good person if you worked really hard. You were only a hard worker if you did it all by yourself.
Okay.
And sleep is for when you were dead.
Wow.
So they have a lot of other things.
That's,
I get pushback sometimes. I'm like, no. I get, like, it's huge. But those are the things that then those things make capitalism really, really powerful.
mm-hmm.
So you combine those three elements of theology, you throw in some, healthy dose of genocide. So then you have a lot of natural resources at your disposal. And it codifies pretty strongly into a capitalism that by the time we hit the founding fathers, what it means to be an American is to be a hard worker who works all by themselves and is the whole goal is to sleep when you are dead.
Wow. And that's definitely a recipe for burnout.
And
follow that to a T and you will end up working with one of us.
You'll have it. And it's only gotten worse. So like we know that there was a lot more time for downtime like in some circles. There was less in some others. Like the idea of American work has obviously evolved and shifted and changed, and who works and who doesn't and all of those kind of other things. But particularly, like, I really think in the technology boom, like really since the 80s when computers came inside your house.
Oh yeah. When you can access email, when you could be expected to respond outside of the working day, for sure.
Yes. When that started to come, the understanding that everyone was cogs in profit machine, and the 80s became unregulated capitalism, and it just became about how much money can someone else make? How much money can you make? What is resource accumulation? And let's do that. That's when burnout really started to take off. Mm-hmm. And we are not the most burned out country statistically, in terms of, well, it's hard. So how do you measure burnout? Like the Japanese measure burnout by suicide rates.
Okay.
So then therefore, like, by some measures, we are the most burned out country. By other measures, we're not. What we are certainly is the country that is the most ill-equipped to handle it. Mm-hmm. Taking time off work is not financially possible for most people, not only because of their paycheck, but because of health insurance. Seeking help it's much more culture. I will give us credit for this. We are better talking about therapy than most other cultures that have burnout. We are really good about talking about therapy. Now, how do we get people to therapy? How do we help them pay for it? How do we help them? We're ill-equipped to handle that. But yeah. And so then generations wise, I know so many people, my parents' generation, who have probably been burned out for 30 years, but would have never used that word and are just kind of eking along into cynicism, apathy, disassociation. You can just tell, like, they don't like the world anymore. And the joke is that once you retire, you get to have fun. And it's almost like we understand that work will burn you out. So stop working and then you can live your life. And millennials come along and we're like, I don't like that. So we're like, no, we're going to do work-life balance. It's going to be great. We're going to take vacations while we do all this other stuff. But the issue is we didn't unlearn the idea of burnout. So we're still working as hard as humanly possible because we really want to go to Disney World. But we've also now made Disney World like a project around which, like, vacation is now a thing from which you can also burn out because you need to like do it on Instagram. And it's this massive mess where you have to sit down and say, my worth is not tied to my productivity. The algorithms want me to feel scared that no one loves me. Yeah. And we all really just need more water, more sleep, and more sunshine.
Yeah. It's a lifestyle that has to change. It has to be not just a couple of actions. When I talk about it, you have to think differently before you feel differently and feel differently before you act differently. Because if you just throw the actions in with still that same mindset, that hustle culture, all of those things, you're not going to get the benefits of it at all.
No. And our brains need tiny changes, right? Because like our brains are equipped to keep us safe. So if your thinking is like, well, I'm just going to be a different person tomorrow, like lol JK, your brain is just going to not let that happen. So it's a journey, right? Like you need the decision to be different. You need the actions to put habits behind that decision. And you need grace because you're going to screw it up.
Oh yeah. Yeah. But you need to, act like you're on vacation every day, find time to do things for yourself every day.
Yeah.
Where can people find the book to get all that information, Kristen?
Oh, what a great question. My business partners would love for me to tell you that question. So I'm just waffling about the content. The cultureofburnout.com. is the website, which will show you where the book is, how to get the book. Our audiobook, as you and I talk right now in the third week of June, our audiobook is in post-production and it should be coming out soon.
Awesome. So just a couple of quick things, because I always love when guests share kind of what they do for themselves. Like how would you say on a regular daily basis, do you practice taking care of yourself? What things do you do to ensure that you are practicing that kindness and impact?
Great question. So our framework is, we call it the 4 R's. So you create space in your life around rest, rejuvenation, realignment, and reconnection. So sleeping, joy, remembering you're a human being and not a human doing, and spending time with your people. So every week I try to craft, craft, I'm careful that all those things, and some of them happen every day and some of my practices overlap. So I'm a huge sports person, massive sports person. And we're in baseball season right now. So a huge part of
you Philly fans are tough.
Oh, we don't mess around. So a huge part of my kind of, even though my blood pressure raises and they annoy me, a huge part of my life really is baseball this time of year, and thinking about baseball, talking about baseball, whatnot. I crochet, which is a really big deal for me. Awesome. So I make sure I do that. I have bipolar, which makes sometimes my brain is not very good at letting me make my own decisions.
Okay.
And it determines some things for me that I'd rather it not. Like that's one of the crappy things about where I am, particularly in my bipolar journey. And so I have a lot of things that I can go to quickly if I need to, that may or may not be in like my plan.
Okay.
Like I set aside, 2 hours to take a nap today. And my brain's like, no, we're not sleeping. So then what do I do instead? What are the hyperfixations that are healthy for me to chase and feed my brain so that the other hyperfixations of really negative self-talk don't take over? So how do I distract my brain with a positive hyperfixation? So like sports is a big one. Writing, I do a lot of creative writing and a lot of things like that. So my answer is always a little bit different than some other people because of this wacko chemistry I have going up in my brain.
Yeah, but I think having different options and being able to adapt and pivot based on where you're at that day, mentally, emotionally, physically, and all those kind of things is how I think probably the consistency of some things happening, even if it looks different, is probably so important.
Yeah. And just remembering that I talk to so many folks, especially so many like overachiever type A folk, that they pick their self-care thing and then it can very easily become the thing that burns them out. So like, well, I really love creative writing, and they'll write fan fiction for years and love it. And then someone will convince them to try to get it published. And all of a sudden, this thing that they loved becomes this other thing that is stressful. And so a big part of all of this journey, like take a shot every time I say the word journey, right? But like the big part of all of this is to recognize that things are also allowed to work for a little while and not forever. Yeah. And like whatever works for you that day is what works. Don't bully yourself into making something work that doesn't feel right on that day. And there's times I think, like I was even driving today and I put on a podcast that I listen to every morning. And I was like, you know what? I really should listen to like other stuff. I've been listening to like 2 artists and these podcasts. And like, I really should listen, like diversify my listening. And then I was like, what the hell does it matter what I listen to? Like, this is what's making me happy.
What you like.
Like the only thing that's gonna judge me is my Spotify Unwrapped at the end of the year. Like, what does it matter? But you catch that stuff like, oh, well, I should be a more well-rounded person. Whatever that means, who cares? Maybe not on that day. Figure it out. As long as it's not hurting yourself or other people, chase your joy.
I think the fact that you're even saying what you should do, that should word that, we hear people talk about, if you're putting the word should in front of something, it's not necessarily always aligned with where you need to be. It's just what you're putting other people's expectations on yourself for.
Absolutely.
So how can companies find you? How can people find you and get more information and work with you, Kristen?
Well, I'll be honest, that one website I said already, the cultureofburnout.com, is a great one-stop shop. You'll be able to get to us from everywhere else from that site.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for, oh my gosh, all of this today, Kristen. I mean, I'm so excited to re-listen to this because definitely the points you hit on, the information to be able to process it, internalize it, and use that in a way when I'm interacting with other people is going to be so helpful. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks so much again for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please let me know any questions or comments that you have. Also, if you can please leave an Apple 5-star review so that this episode can be shared with more women. There's 2 quotes that I love. Alone we may be strong, but together we are stronger, as well as when women support each other, incredible things happen. So let's be stronger and incredible together, as well as maybe just have some fun along the way. Thanks so much and talk to you soon. Bye.